Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the June version of Historic Presentation Night at the Yankee Air Museum. Again this month, I'm Jeff Bush, your host. I want to welcome everyone tonight, both first-timers and long-timers, non-members and members. Of course, this event is free for members. This is one of the many benefits you receive when you do sign up for a membership. As always, for members, we do ask for donations to assist in continuing to bring these fine programs to us every month. We've got a box over here, another one out in the hall. So if on your way out as a member, if you would drop it $5 or $10 or $20 or $50 or whatever you got. If you got a 50, I can give you change. So anyway. No, not Monopoly. We cut the line there, yeah. Upcoming events, next Wednesday, June 8th, we've got Wild Wednesday. It's going to feature the Canadian CF-18 demonstration team, flyovers by the Canadian C-130 Hercules, and the Canadian CP-140 Aurora aircraft. Who knows what a CP-140 Aurora is? Oh, you were here last year. Stop it. You've got too much background, Randy. Come on, man. You know. The CP-140 is the Canadian version of the P-3. That's it. That's it. I don't know all the differences. I did watch a documentary on the CP-140 a number of months back, but my memory just, it's gone, you know. So.
I might add a comment here.
Please.
If anybody would like to tour a P-3, we have one at Southbridge that's open every weekend. And squadron members give tours of the airplane, tell the hairy tales of flying around the world.
There you go. Is that one that you flew?
Yes.
That's worth mentioning as well. Randy's got a couple hours in P3s. So tickets for next Wednesday are on sale on the website. Again, it's a drive-in event like we do for Thunder over Michigan, and it's going to be a great show. The following Sunday, June 12th, Wings and Wheels will be at our new Aeronautics Center. Yes. Rumor has it. We'll know by the 13th, won't we? And of course, July 16th and 17th is going to be Thunder over Michigan, featuring the Air Force F-16 demonstration team and the Navy Blue Angels. You can check the website, www.yankeeairmuseum.org, for more information on all of these. Now I'd like to ask you all to turn your cell phones to stun or off, and please hold all questions until after the presentation. There will be a Q&A session at the end. On 15 August 1945, in what can only be called a strange twist of fate, what started out as the final air mission of World War II ended with 4 U.S. Navy pilots being shot down in peacetime, as hostilities officially ended while their mission was underway. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Wukowitz, who will speak to us about his book, Dogfight Over Tokyo. Mr. Wukowitz will also be signing his book after in the museum, and we'll cover more of that in closing comments. John?
Thank you very much for that fine introduction. I certainly appreciate being back here. I've spoken 3 or 4 prior times at the museum and had a great time each instance. This also marks sort of a recovery or homecoming for me in a different way, in that it's the first talk I've given since before COVID, a first live audience kind of thing. I mean, I did a few Zooms with different places, and it just didn't quite feel the same in any way. So it's nice to have a live audience, hopefully an awake audience in 10 minutes in front of me. But that's on me if it doesn't work out. Anyway, I got my start, just a little bit of background, because I don't know how many of you have heard me talk before. If you have, then maybe you remember some of this. But I got my start as an educator. I taught 8th grade history and language arts in Trenton, Michigan for 30 years. And there's a picture going up there of me, sadly, in my first year of teaching, 1968. Love the glasses. You can't see the long sideburns all that well in this picture, but the broad tie with the knot that almost strangled you is seen. I mean, that was a fashion in those days, though, but that is how we looked. And not long after that, a movie came out, Revenge of the Nerds. And I'm not so sure that someone who made that film didn't get a look at my photo there. But anyway, I really enjoyed teaching. I loved it, actually, for 30 years. Midway through my teaching, I turned also to writing. I was doing both at the same time for about 15 years. I started out with magazines. Actually, my first article was in the local Wyandotte News Herald, downriver Michigan, for $20. And it was just the best day of my life. You know, I thought this was fantastic. Well, one thing led to another, and to these books that you see here, all dealing, or at least most of them, dealing with the Pacific War. Eisenhower obviously was not. There we go. Did I skip a page? Nope. The book, I just did hand in the manuscript for my next book, and that's the book jacket for it. Just came in today, actually. It's about the famous World War I aviator, Eddie Rickenbacker, car racer, turned Eastern Airlines around. Fascinating life. He escaped death too many times to count, as he would often point out. He was never shy in promoting himself. But it was a fascinating story, and I'm a World War II author, so what am I fooling around with Eddie Rickenbacker for? Well, the reason is, in 1942, the government asked him to go on a secret mission across the Pacific to deliver a secret message to Douglas MacArthur. MacArthur had been, as was his wont, making all kinds of comments about what he wanted and didn't want, and he was criticizing Franklin Roosevelt, etc. So the message, they think, was keep your trap closed, kind of a thing. Well, halfway through their flight on a B-17, Rickenbacker and there were 7 other men in the plane. They became lost, ran out of gas, had to ditch in the equatorial Pacific. For 24 days they drifted, most of it without food and water. So it's a story of that particular episode. Quite an amazing, amazing thing. That'll be out early next year. I've also done some work on television. Those are some of them right there. They're great, great at replaying. I recently had, or at least before COVID, recently had the 2 pretty neat things happen to me I'm quite proud of, and so I wanted to mention them. Forgive me for doing that, but I am really proud. This book, Tin Can Titans, received the most prestigious award that a writer of naval history can get, Rear Admiral Samuel Eliot Morison Award. Maybe some of you know that name from the books he did. But it's a big award, sort of like the Oscars in Hollywood, minus the money, fame, and glory. But for a writer like me, nerd that I am, it's a pretty cool thing to have. So I wanted to point that out. And the next thing is, this book, Hell from the Heavens, is a story of a destroyer called the USS Laffey. Now, if any of you have ever been to Patriots Point, South Carolina, the aircraft carrier Yorktown, and that's where these 4 aviators are from that I'm talking about tonight. The Yorktown is there, and right next to it is a destroyer. That's the Laffey. In April of 1945, 22 kamikazes attacked the Laffey in 80 minutes, and the ship fended them off. It did survive the attack. So I wrote this book about it. Mel Gibson is pictured there. He's directing the film, and Mark Wahlberg is going to star in it as the captain of the ship. Now, usually when a writer signs the film rights away to somebody, it's forgotten as far as the writer's concerned. Elmore Leonard, is that a name some of you? Yeah, he was from this area. Wonderful writer. If you like Justified, the TV series, or a lot of, Get Shorty, all that stuff. He said, when I sign the film rights away to my book, I turn around and walk away. I say goodbye. It's Hollywood's baby. Well, Gibson and the screenwriter emailed me quite a bit. I was really flattered about that, asking, now if a ship turned left, what did they call it? You know, really basic stuff in many ways. You know, and so I would give them the proper, that might have been me, I'm sorry. Yeah, the pointer. The pointer, stay back here. So there are a lot of those emails. They also asked me to come out, that's his home in Malibu, to go over the screenplay with he and other editors and things like that. Now that's Mel Gibson, this is Rose. They have a 4-year-old son together. At the time we took this picture, Rose was 29 and Gibson wasn't. You think I'm going to make fun of Braveheart? You know, he hears about that kind of thing. Because I remember one time going over the screenplay, there was this one scene I did not like. And it was my job to say that to him. And before I'm ready to say it, I'm looking at Gibson at the table, and in the back corner, there's this medieval battle axe or something like that. And do I really want to tick off Braveheart? But it's something you had to do. Anyway, the movie will be getting going pretty soon. Now, this book tonight, people often ask me where I get ideas for books from all over. For this one, 10, 12 years ago, I did a biography of Admiral Halsey. And in researching that, this last flight came up. In the war's dying moments, really, Halsey sent out some aviators to attack Japanese targets. I did it again, I'm sorry. I know. What's that? If I stay over here? Yep. Okay, we'll see how that. Sorry, you're out of the talk now. The good side. Anyway, Halsey ordered these guys out to attack. They didn't want to go. The war's going to end any moment. But they did, and 4 of them were shot down and died. And Halsey said, okay, I hope that history will remember the aviators who did not return from that last flight. And I thought, that's a good idea, maybe. And so I tucked it away and, you know, eventually came back to it. Now, if you read any of my books, you'll see I like to tell the stories through the experiences of the people who were there. I like to personalize it. Some historians will write, Company A did this or Company B did that. I like to say Charles Natter did this and Billy Hobbs did that. If you think of the movies or TV shows or whatever that you most enjoy, I'll bet it's because it's of a character somewhere in that story. Even if the character's evil, like one of the most fascinating characters for me was Hannibal Lecter. You know, not a nice guy, but boy, was he fascinating to watch. There was a connection there. So I try to tell it through the experiences of people. Thus, I rely heavily on letters and interviews and things like that in assembling my books. Now, there were 4 aviators who died on that last flight, which actually did occur after the ceasefire. They were shot down, moments after the ceasefire. I won't be concentrating on these 2. Howard Harrison and Joe Saloff were 2 of the pilots. I wanted to focus on 2 others. This one, Billy Hobbs from Kokomo, Indiana. His family is still there, you know, his ensuing family, his sister is still there actually. And he was born to fly. You can see that quote there that his sister said. Billy always was interested in airplanes. He'd love Yankee Air Museum, that kind of thing. He was making paper airplanes, and there was a little airstrip not far from their farm south of Kokomo, and he was going out all the time looking at the planes taking off and landing. He loved everything about flying. The other aviator is Eugene Mandiberg from our area, Detroit. The Mandibergs owned a furniture store in Detroit. As opposed to Billy Hobbs, Eugene Mandeberg was a serious student of social ills, as he would call them. As you see on the screen there, he wrote some articles for he was a student at the campus at Ann Arbor, highlighting social problems. A 1940 story about a lynching in Georgia. So while Billy Hobbs joined Air Group 88 for adventure and flying and dogfights and all that stuff, Mandeberg was there because got a duty to combat evil. Two different personalities in these young men. Air Group 88 was a group they joined. Now you see an aircraft carrier here. The men who took care of the aircraft carrier were called the ship's company. The men who flew the planes comprised the air group. Okay? So you take Air Group 88, for instance, they might serve on this ship for 6 months and then get a little rest and then go to a different aircraft carrier as a unit. Okay? So Air Group 88, they joined on August 15th, 1944. It was formed, Hobbs's 22nd birthday. Any of you remember the date World War II ended in the Pacific? It's coming up. You didn't expect a pop quiz, did you? Anyway, it's coming up. And they were, as the quote says, they were just young kids. Not old enough to vote, but old enough to fly and go in harm's way. Excited to get there. This is one of Billy Hobbs's letters to his sister. The family was most gracious at giving me everything they had. In this letter, Billy Hobbs wrote, I had a lot of fun this morning on a strike. Now this is a training strike. They're not over in the war yet. We went out and strafed and bombed a target. While we were doing this, some other fighters jumped us. We really had some dogfight. In other words, this is exciting. I can't wait to get over to the Pacific and enter combat and match my skills against the Japanese pilots. You know, the excitement was there. The excitement for Billy Hobbs did not end with training during the day, but in intensive exercises each night. These are just a few of the girls. He loved playing the field, so to speak. Was out to Colonial Club with Mary last night. Nice time, did okay. Another night, met a girl who was quite fast. Most like track stars is all I could figure out, right? But that was Billy. He kept a small diary, and at the back of it, these are 2 pages from his diary of 30 pages listing girls he had met in various places. I mean, here, you know, Minot, North Dakota, Livermore, California, Tipton, Indiana, North Dakota, etc. He just loved having a good time, whereas Eugene Mandeberg was the opposite. He found Sonia, end of story. That was it. Met her, as the screen says, fell in love. She liked his intellectual side. She'd been dating some boys that she wasn't impressed with because they were flighty, kind of a thing. Not Eugene. Mandeberg could joke, though. He did have a humorous side. In one letter he wrote his mom after a gunnery exercise, everything is fine here, I got some hits in gunnery, so I'm no longer a virgin. And then he added real quick, Mom, in gunnery. You know, I got a hit in gunnery here. He didn't want her to think he was out playing the field. So he did have some kind of a sense of humor anyway. Well, they went on and trained in Hawaii. There's a picture of the air group with some of the names listed. But again, everyone wanted to get started. Hawaii had its charms, but there was a war we had to get to. We wanted to get into the action. Billy Hobbs's mom, Hattie, when he left to go overseas, walked up and hugged him and removed her wedding ring from her finger and gave it to him as a way of, well, maybe this will help keep him safe. Billy put it on his dog tag. And so I have a picture of his dog tag there, and there's just a generic picture of a wedding ring. It's not hers. She wanted to give him something to keep him safe, said Billy Hobbs' sister, Nancy. Sonia and Zelda, that's Mandeberg's mom, Zelda. I can hardly think of Eugene leaving, Zelda wrote to Sonia. Sonia's the girl he was going to marry. Let us hope and pray that God will bring them back safe. They went to the combat zone on June 17th, 1945, and joined the venerable aircraft carrier Yorktown. That's at Patriots Point. They performed as part of the vast task groups during those days in the Pacific. Yorktown had a wonderful history. It had been involved in a lot of different operations. Hollywood made an Oscar-winning documentary about it, and there's the cover to the poster. And so Hobbs and everyone, they were sure, hey, with being on the Yorktown, man, we're going to see some action. This ship finds action. Not only that, we're being commanded, the overall commander of the task forces, Bull Halsey, Admiral William Halsey, the most aggressive Pacific naval commander possibly that there was then. Sort of like Patton was in the Pacific, Europe. Many of you know, about him. Patton in the Pacific, in Europe, Halsey in the Pacific theater. He had his aircraft carrier out at sea on December 7th, 1941. When he came back to Pearl Harbor, nothing but destruction. He said, I'm going to get them back. I'm going to get them. And the public loved Halsey for his quotes. Before we're through with them, the Japanese language will be spoken only in hell, he said. And the public just went, yeah, that's the attitude. They were shocked. First of all, where was Pearl Harbor? A lot of them wondered. You may find that odd, but that is actually true. I read that so many different places and talked to so many different guys. We didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. And here, they're surprised by the Japanese. Finally, someone is speaking about it. He transported the Doolittle Raiders. You know, Jimmy Doolittle, the famous flight over Tokyo in '42. His carriers took them out to the launching point. And then he became commander of the South Pacific at Guadalcanal, Tulagi. It was the island, actually. It's right across from Guadalcanal in the South Pacific. He had this sign erected here, urging his men, kill Japs, kill more Japs. Maybe politically incorrect now, maybe, but in World War II, the public loved that attitude. Well, there are a couple flaws with Bull Halsey. First of all, he missed out on the two big carrier battles in 1942. Battle of the Coral Sea, he was too far away to get there in time. Battle of Midway, he was sick and replaced by Admiral Raymond Spruance. Then he committed 3 blunders. In 1944, October of 44, Leyte Gulf in the Philippine Islands, his task was to guard San Bernardino Strait. The strait is a narrow body of water. And his job was to keep the Japanese striking force from coming through and getting into MacArthur's landing forces. Well, Halsey wanted to get a crack at Japanese carriers because he had missed out earlier. And the Japanese knew this, so they sent down a decoy fleet of carriers devoid of any air group. And they lured Halsey away. He took the bait, and then the Japanese strike force barreled through and were only stopped by a heroic action by a unit called Taffy 3. But anyway, he received a lot of criticism by the military for that. Then he took his ships into 2 different typhoons, which caused a lot of damage and loss of life, especially the December of 1944 one. So people wondered about him in the military. The home front still loved him because they didn't know about this. It would be political secrets of sort, classified information. But his cohorts, Halsey knew, I'm suffering in their eyes. I've lost a lot. So he wanted to get his reputation back. Well, There we go. He wanted to get his reputation back, and Air Group 88, with Billy Hobbs and Eugene Mandelberg and the others, would be part of his weapon to regain a lost reputation. Some of the members on the aircraft carrier Yorktown were, by then, some of the veteran members, not the Air Group yet. They were getting a little tired of Halsey's bombastic statements because they knew, yeah, he talks the words and we fight the actions. And we suffer, Patton, they said of him, his old blood and guts, his guts and our blood kind of a thing of Patton. Halsey was sort of like that. And a member of the Yorktown crew wrote this poem, "Bo his name and Bo his nature, Bo his talk will always be. But for me, many like me, he's a perfect SOB." Typhoons never worry this guy, though they come from north or south. Typhoons? Bah, he has one every time he opens his big mouth. He has uttered one desire to mount Hirohito's steed. Halsey bragged that when he got into Tokyo, he was going to get on Emperor Hirohito's white stallion and ride through the streets of Tokyo. And the peace parade in Nippon, this bold warrior wants to lead. Then this guy from the Yorktown ended it with, "He should be a mighty rider, on that horse. For I tell you from my heart, I consider him part equine. And I think you know which part." Now again, these were the guys who had been with Halsey, serving under him for quite a while. The Air Group was just pumped, yeah, at this time. But some of the men were getting a little tired of it and wanted little to do with him. Well, Billy Hobbs on July 1st wrote in his diary, "We are all very anxious to get into combat." So they started attacking Japan, and I'm only going to talk about a little bit of this as far as the number of missions. It'll take too long to cover them all. You can see the arrows here. Those are all different missions all along the home islands. They conducted much more, 42 missions over 46 days off Japan. I mean, they were rarely a day off, unless maybe coming from here down to here, kind of a thing. July 9th, the day before the very first mission, before Hobbs and Mandelberg were going to fly off and attack something, Hobbs put in his diary, "This is the day before Strike Day. We are all very eager to get it." So I'm still eager, excited. On July 10th, the morning of, the men assembled in the ready rooms. A couple pictures there, telling jokes, swapping charms, Hobbs looking at his mom's ring. Macabre jokes, by that I mean, my brother was a naval aviator in the Vietnam War, and he said before we went on missions, we used to tease each other and joke. "You get my," and fill in your own blank, "if I get it. If I mort," they said, "if I die, you can have my," that kind of thing. They were just making jokes, just to ease the tension. The squadron history said this was the day the squadron had been waiting for 10 months. However, one guy admitted to something different, Ensign John Willis. He stood up and said, "I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I'm scared shitless." We're going out on some heavy stuff here. And so he admitted it out loud, what probably every young man there was thinking anyway. Well, they took off on July 10th, the first strike, and found that the airfields over the Tokyo plain were thickly studded. They could see 10 or 12 of them at any moment. The anti-aircraft fire bursting all over. Billy descended, red balls arced up toward him and burst into flames that emitted a burnt cloth odor. Suddenly he's diving right into it. And one of the men told me, he's still alive in Virginia, he said, "John, I can't tell you how fearful that is, to turn your plane directly into anti-aircraft fire. For every burst you see here, there are 2 others that you don't see." He said, "But you just have to do it." Well, this is Hobbs's first experience at that particular thing. This personalized the war. In other words, Hobbs is thinking, they're not just shooting anywhere, they're shooting at me. Personalized it for him. Well, they're shooting at the air group, they're shooting at the ship, they're shooting at a plane. No, they're shooting at me. One aviator, a friend of his, died, Charles Emhoff, when his Corsair fighter exploded. Billy wrote in his diary, "This is my first real combat, Hob, and I was certainly scared." Saw plenty of ACAC as anti-aircraft fire. He's scared. Where's that eagerness? The excitement? He's finding out it's different. Then on July 14th, Lieutenant Commander Cromlin, who was the skipper of the fighting squadron of Air Group 88, talented flyer who had won all, received many awards, died. He nipped the Hellcat of Lieutenant Saloff. He was one of the other 4 guys I mentioned at the start that I'm not focusing on. Well, his plane in foggy conditions nipped Saloff's plane. He went spiraling out of control. Now, these young flyers like Hobbs and Mandenberg are thinking, hey, I'm a rookie. Cromlin has been involved for 2-3 years in aviation. If he dies, what are my chances? Personalizes it for them. Then July 18th to 30th, there are 5 major attacks against the Imperial Japanese Navy at Kure Naval Base down here. And this was, being the major naval base, the Japanese had it heavily ringed with anti-aircraft guns, so much so that in Philippine bars, before Hobbs and the group went up to Japan, veterans of an earlier strike against Kure just said, stay away from Kure. Don't even go near it if you can avoid it. Well, you don't have much choice. You're ordered out. You do. Well, in those attacks, 7 more men were killed. Now 12 men have been shot down in 3 weeks. Lieutenant Hennessy, that's the man I mentioned earlier about diving into the anti-aircraft fire, who's still alive. He couldn't celebrate. He couldn't feel good. My shipmates, who I'd lived with, talked with, drank with, and flew with for many months, and ceased to exist on this day. It's hitting home more and more and more. Halsey, though, loved it. It's me, and I wish my ships had wheels so I could drive them on land. Ships do not have wheels, so then I could chase them inland after we drive them from the coast. Halsey was still eager to get going. Now, a little note here, Halsey's one of my heroes. I've done a lot of writing on him, and I write about his mistakes and all that, but I still think he deserves all the acclaim he can get. But I wrote this book from the viewpoint of the Air Group, not from me. So this is the Air Group. Halsey made some mistakes here, but the Air Group hates his, they started to hate his guts, and the parents even more, so as you'll see. When will this war end? Now they know that the war's got to end soon. We're off the coast of Japan, right? It can't last forever. When will this war end? First week of August, Halsey suddenly pulled all the ships off to go away from the coast of Japan. And they're going, well, why? We're not attacking. Well, on July 22nd, Halsey had been informed of the possession of the atom bomb and that we were going to use it, so keep your ships away until we order you back. Well, on August 6th, the first one was dropped. August 7th, the Air Group learned of it, of that atom bomb. All hands very much thrilled. It will shorten the war. Now they're thinking, well, who cares about Halsey? The war's going to be over now. We're going to get out of this. August 9th, second atom bomb was dropped. Maybe we'll get back home quick. Maybe Eugene can see his fiancée, and Hobbs can see his bevy of girls, whatever the case may be. Thank God, Hobbs wrote on August 7th, maybe there will be a lot of lives saved, and maybe I'll be home soon. Notice he was saying, oh, it's a lot of fun. I can't wait to get involved. No, maybe I'll get home soon, huh? Sonia, right here, even allowed herself to think of their wedding. This is Zelda Mandeberg. We were going to talk about the wedding, Zelda wrote. Of course, dear, it's kind of hard to make definite plans not knowing exactly when Eugene will be home. However, just talking about it makes me very happy. War's going to end soon. He's going to come home. But back aboard the Yorktown, their hopes of no more flights ended. Very next morning, the war was on again. They knew that we were fighting a war that had already been won, and yet they're still ordering us out. Imagine that feeling, huh? It's useless. If ever I prayed in my life, I am praying tonight that they will end this bloody war, because the next day they had to go out on a mission. But Chaplain Moody just came by and said, no dice, so I guess we will strike. Maurice Proctor, who was involved in the last flight, said the night before that final flight in the air group history. We didn't know it, but the anniversary of our squadron forming, August 15th, was to be the happiest day back home in the United States, and one of the saddest in mine and the rest of the squadrons. Okay, the last flight, August 15th, the last day of the war in the Pacific. 1 year since the air group had been formed, Hobbs's birthday also. Billy Hobbs needed one more strike to receive a promotion. He was an ensign. He'd get a promotion to Lieutenant JG. Billy's team leader, Howdy Harrison, they were not scheduled to go out on a flight that August 15th. But he asked his superior, hey, can we go out instead? And Hobbs will get his mission and get his promotion. Sure. You know, the other group didn't mind at all being replaced like that. Hobbs was not so certain. We shouldn't need to strike again. But Cagle, that was their squadron leader, says I need one more run to make lieutenant. So out he goes. Orders are orders. On 4:15 a.m. of August 15th, Howdy Harrison, he's one of those four, and 11 other Hellcats lift up for that mission. So there's 12 aviators in Hellcats on this final mission. Harrison detached two to remain at high altitude and relay messages to and from Yorktown. There was heavy overcast in certain places, so he said, you guys stay back, fly at a higher altitude, I'll send a message to you, you relay it to Yorktown. So now they're down to 10. A team led by Lieutenant Odom became lost in what their action report described as a finger of overcast. I wasn't quite sure about what that meant exactly, how you get lost in a finger of overcast. But that's what the action report says. Now they're down to 6 Hellcats and pilots. At 6:30, Yorktown received the message to stop that flight because Japan had agreed to peace terms. They relayed that information. Howdy Harrison, here's the last 4. They were there were actually 6 at this stage, but they were just ready to attack the airfield here when they received the message, abort, abort, war's over. So they never did attack, okay? They started to turn back to go out and rejoin Yorktown and start celebrating the end of the war. They got 5 miles out, and then, before they had a chance to drop their wing tanks of extra fuel, which slows the plane down a bit, they didn't have a chance, but they were attacked by 15 to 20 Japanese fighters. Sailoff's plane is hit, and he bailed out over or near Tokyo Bay. These 2 guys, Proctor and Hansen, survived. A lot of bullet holes in their planes, but they managed to get away. Now there are 3. Sailoff has already died. Harrison, Hobbs, and Mandeberg are left. As they're leaving, Hansen and Proctor see one Hellcat just explode in the air with the aviator bailing out, and 2 others smash into the ground, but they didn't know who was who. They couldn't tell. So when you think of it, Billy was one of those three, and Eugene was one of those three. Billy died with his mom's ring on his dog tags, thinking, I'm dying and the war's over. Mandiberg's thinking, I'm not going to make it back to see Sonia. Imagine what the thought, obviously I don't know their exact thoughts, no one could, but there had to be something like that. Well, two Japanese farmers were tilling their field near that Japanese village. Here's Atsugi Airfield that they were to attack. When they saw a plane, watching planes in combat, and an American craft crash and explode a quarter mile from where they were. So they ran over to check things out. Soon Japanese military officials arrived at that site and found the body of an American civilian fireman, Japanese civilian fireman, wrapped the remains in a straw mat and carried them to Myohoji's shrine right here. Here's the village, the shrine. There's the distance scale there. Saloff had turned toward the sea, so the remains here had to be Hobbs, Harrison, or Mandiberg, but no one knows. This is the crowning loss, stated the squadron history. The end of the war brought little jubilation among the pilots. Morale among the pilots was at rock bottom after the last 4 deaths. I just have this just to show it to you. When I was researching their action reports, it just was so stark to come across the actual page where they mentioned these. I don't know, it just hit me as I was doing all my research, you know, my head buried in all this stuff, and that they failed to return with his flight, kind of a thing. Father Moody, the chaplain, said Harrison, Saloff, Hobbs, and Mandiberg were lost on what now this is a Catholic chaplain, okay? I always considered a stupid mission on the day the treaty was signed. Personally, blame Halsey for sending out this strike when we knew the war was going to be over, which is so true. The aftermath. Now back in Kokomo, where Hobbs was from, big celebration. Here's the Kokomo newspaper, still in existence, describing what they did. Citizens ran outside their homes, they got in their car, driving to the center of town, horns hawking, having a great, great time. The Hobbs family tried to join in, but they didn't know for sure. Can we? Halsey had canceled further operations, but how is Billy? Carolyn Hobbs, a sister-in-law, remembers Mom and Dad were crying. There they are right there, Billy's mom and dad. They were crying. Billy was still over there in the Pacific. The town was celebrating, but they couldn't be part of it, you know? We don't know for sure. He's probably okay, but we don't know. Same thing with the Mandibergs. They couldn't relax. Sonia, it was just too difficult to celebrate peace when she didn't know. Mom was planning a life with Jean, said Sonia's daughter, Susan Sussman. The war had just ended, and they lived in New York City, and all New York was celebrating, but she couldn't. Well, August 26th, 11 days after the war was over, Zelda informed Sonia, I still haven't heard anything, no mail from Eugene. I'm starting to get worried. Some of my neighbors have heard from their sons, but we haven't. Zelda finally, 3 days later, got some letters, August 29th, exactly 2 weeks after her son had been shot down. She didn't know, obviously. What a relief, she informed Sonia. 5 letters from Eugene, the last one dated August 14th. Now she's thinking, August 14th, this was written. August 15th, the war ended. What are the odds that anything will happen to my son in 24 hours? Yeah. Eugene told me, okay, let's see. Then August 2nd, Joyce Hobbs mailed a birthday card to Billy. And that's the birthday card there from the family collection. Dear Bill, dear, as I write this little message, I pray God is keeping you safe from all harm and will bring you back to us. vaccine came back. It was returned unopened, returned to sender unclaimed. Well, wait a minute. If Billy's okay, why are they returning his mail? That can't be good. She sent out another one, and that too was returned with the same stamp on it. Well, finally, Lieutenant Commander Cagle, the commander of the fighting squadron of Air Group 88, wrote this letter. It was dated August 16th, but they didn't get it until afterwards. My unwilling duty to inform you that your son is listed as missing in action. This is to Mandibergs. He wrote one for each of the four. There is, however, some hope for his life. The surrender news was radioed to them, and they were instructed to return to base, but then they were attacked. Mandy was one of 4 of our lads who failed to return. All we know is that there is hope. Maybe it was just damaged and he might have parachuted out to safety. But from September 19th to the 24th came that, their official telegram notifying that their son is missing in action. This one is to the Mandibergs. Mandiberg is missing in action 15 August 1945, last day of the war. So now they know what's going on. Kokomo Tribune printed that on September 20th, that Hobbs is missing. He was shot down by jet planes shortly after word came that the war had ended. 2 months went by, still nothing, and then Cagle wrote another letter. We all had great hopes that he would be found, but we haven't. I'm sorry to say, but I'm sure you want only the truth. We can now hold no further hope for the life of your son. Usually, I love digging in archives. I'm just a nerd that way. I just love researching stuff. When you come across this stuff, you pause over it. At least I do, for sure. A year later, Secretary of Navy Forrestal sent the official letter declaring him as deceased. They have to wait a year and 1 day before they can send the official letter out. Reluctantly forced to the conclusion he is deceased. Printed in the Detroit Free Press here, September 22nd, 1946. Hattie Hobbs had arranged a funeral celebration for her son in Kokomo that many people attended. He was the last Howard County youth to give his life, according to the Kokomo paper. But because Hattie Hobbs buried memories, not remains, it was an open wound for her, and for the dad, and for everybody. She buried memories. For the rest of her life, Hattie often sat on the front porch. Her family told me that more than a few of them told me this, glancing down the road. And I interviewed them at that house. You could look out and see that road, expecting to see her son stroll up. Mother, until she died, said Nancy Exmeyer, would sit and look down the lane, always looking to see if he might be coming back. She blamed Halsey. Zelda Mandiberg was angry, said Eugene's nephew, hated Admiral Halsey, who made the boys go out. Like Hattie, Zelda would sometimes stand on the front porch too, hoping that maybe my boy will come back. Hattie Hobbs that year started, each year on the anniversary of her son's death, August 15th, she wrote a little poem that was printed in the Kokomo newspaper. And she did that until she died. And this is the first one here, just in memory of Hobbs and his 3 buddies. His smiling way and pleasant face are a pleasure to recall. He had a kindly word for each and was beloved by all. The years may wipe out many things, but the bond of love won't sever the memory of those happy days when we were all together. Sadly missed by Mom and family. Now, what's going on today with the remains? In 1946, an American Graves Registration team came in and recovered the remains that were taken to the temple. The next year, they visited the site of the plane crash and found certain items in there in the dirt. They confirmed that the aircraft was a Hellcat and that it most likely came from Yorktown. You can get that from numbers, serial numbers, numbers on the airplane's fuselage. They did tell the Mandibergs that if they were forced to make a guess, they thought it was their son, because of a couple little trinkets that were in there that they thought were from him, but they couldn't be sure. Well, those remains were taken to American Cemetery in the Philippines, but each of the 4 families, without any identity, positive identification, wondered, is that my son, my husband, etc., etc. Well, right now, as we speak, and almost literally as we speak, government analysts are testing DNA. They've contacted all the 4. As recently as March this year, Richard Mandiberg emailed me, we have some news. They're now in DNA on Eugene's remains. It's still not conclusive, but they're going to compare it with the other 2. So sooner or later, they'll find out which body, which boy, which aviator that is. 2 of the people from the story remain alive, 2 of those families. Here's Nancy Hobbs Exmeyer. There's a picture of Billy Hobbs there. And Sonia. Sonia remains alive. She is in her 90s. That's in 2018. She is still alive. I checked last week. Well, Mrs. Hobbs thought what could happen in 24 hours, but I assume she is still kicking. She lives in New York City still. I visited her in her apartment there. She moved on, got married, had a wonderful life with her husband, who's now deceased, but she never lost thought of Eugene. Her daughter, Susan Sussman, my mother's old wound was opened when she and other family members compiled information for a documentary about Sonia. She had some connections with Hollywood. And in doing that, they contacted the Mandiberg family, Eugene's family, and got information. Susan said, I always sort of knew about Mandy because Mom talked about him. There was always this other part to our family. You know, not just Dad, but some other guy. While researching the story, Susan, that's her there, in an effort to learn more about Mandiberg, sent emails, got in contact, and they all started sharing things. The Mandibergs had known nothing other than Eugene had been engaged, but they didn't know her name, they didn't know anything about her. So they were happy to learn a lot of things. Sonia was very happy that Eugene might not have died in Tokyo Bay like the one aviator did, but had also been treated with respect by a Buddhist monk. She said maybe that was my Eugene, and he was treated with respect. Sonia said Richard Mandiberg is the last person alive who knew Eugene. It's like Eugene's reaching out across the years to us. After 70 years, he was reaching out, telling the last remaining individual that he wanted to be put to rest. Now, I mentioned Patriots Point. They also are keeping stories alive down there if you ever go see them. Here's Yorktown. Here's the USS Laffey, the destroyer there. Here's some members of the Hobbs family with Bill Watkinson right here, just recently passed away. He was the last surviving member of the fighting squadron. And I was able to get some helpful information, excuse me, from him. Hattie wrote in her 1968 memorial poem, marking her son's death, "Nothing but memories as we journey on, looking for a smile from a loved one gone. None knew the depths of our deep regret, but we remember when others forget." We remember when others forget. Those are the lines that she wrote in that poem. We've just celebrated Memorial Day, obviously. How can we make sure that Billy Hobbs, Eugene Vandenberg, Joseph Seloff, and Howard Harrison, and all the others aren't forgotten? Maybe it's just by doing our duties. And here, in talking to veterans throughout the years, which is such a delightful part of my job, and one, sadly, that's quickly fading away, not one of the men has said, yeah, I'm a hero. And some of them did extraordinary things. And I'd ask them, do you think you're a hero? No, no, no. Now this would be true if some young Marine came back from overseas, he'd say the same thing, or she would say the same thing. I just happen to work with World War II. They don't say anything like that. They just say I was only doing what I was supposed to do. That's all. I was just doing what I was supposed to do, and they shrug it off like it's nothing. But when you think about what if everyone did what they're supposed to do? I was in education for so many years. What if every teacher taught the way he or she was supposed to do? Now, I had the beautiful experience of working with some remarkable educators and a couple who should never have been in the classroom. You must have had more. And by that, I just mean they didn't care about who they're teaching. They didn't like the age group. They didn't know their material. You know, that kind of, I'm not talking about any kind of perverted, you know, they like kids or anything like that. Although that is obviously a factor. But it was just they didn't care. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. What if every administrator administered the way he or she was supposed to do? What if every student studied the way he or she was supposed to? And what if every parent parented just the way he or she was supposed to do? That'd be a pretty good world. That's all. Just don't, we all know what we're supposed to do. Deep down, we all know. Our guts start nagging at us usually if we're not. Eleanor Roosevelt in World War II spent a lot of time visiting the servicemen. 4 of her sons were in the military and in some really heavy stuff, not just ceremonial things. One was a Raider, a Carlson Raider. She had a poem in her purse, and she said it every day. And the poem went, "Dear Lord, lest I continue my complacent way, help me to remember somewhere out there a man died for me today. As long as there be war, I then must ask and answer, am I worth dying for? Have I done what I'm supposed to do?" The same message as a powerful movie, Saving Private Ryan. You know, at the end where Captain Miller, played by Tom Hanks, is propped up at the wall after the climactic fight, and Private Ryan is off a little bit, played by Matt Damon, and Captain Miller beckons him over and looks up at him as he's dying. And he tries to muster as much strength as he can, but it comes out mainly as a whisper, and he says, "Earn this. Earn it." In other words, he's saying, we have just died to save you, Private Ryan. Go home and earn this gift. Be a good person. Be a good man. Do what you're supposed to do. That's why my favorite scene is actually right after that, when the elderly Private Ryan is at the Normandy Cemetery, and his family is a little bit behind him, including grandkids, and he's looking for Captain Miller's tombstone. And he finds it. And he's standing there looking down. And he says, "You know, I remember what you told me that day on the bridge against the wall. I've tried to be a good person." Then his wife came walking over, and he turns and looks at her with, such longing in his eyes, and he says, "Tell me I've been a good man." She goes, yeah, you've been a good man." Well, if we all just simply, do what we're supposed to do, we'll all have wonderful lives. The veterans will not be forgotten at any time of the year, not just Memorial Day. And the veterans of all wars, please, I'm working with World War II, and so I focus on that, but all conflicts. And everyone will have a good life, like this little kid in Arlington National Cemetery on Memorial Day a few years back. My grandson, who's now in his 4th year at the Air Force Academy, and obviously I'm very proud of him, he too will have a good life if we all just do what we're supposed to do. Now, I always end my talks with allowing some close childhood friends of mine to have the final 3 words. I spent a great deal of time with these people. That's awful. I was also a comic nerd. Anyway, that's the talk. Just a plug for that movie if you haven't seen it. And this, I have nothing to do with this. I just love it. I watch it every Memorial Day. Taking Chance, HBO. This, about 80 minutes is all. Beautiful, tender movie showing, this is a Marine officer played by Kevin Bacon, taking Chance. Chance Phelps was a Marine who was killed in Iraq. And he was taking Chance home. An escort, a military escort it's called. And this movie shows every step of the way from taking from Chance Phelps. They don't show him being killed, but from where he was killed all the way through the preparations and on to home. It is such a powerful film. I highly recommend it. Okay, if you have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to fire away. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I read a book written about possibly the Japanese airplanes that attacked that group. It was an elite group of the remaining aces in Japan and their hottest airplanes that went out on a vengeful mission. Have you run across that book?
No, I'm not familiar. What's the name of it?
I have it at home. I don't have the name of it. But,
yeah, no, I read some other books that mentioned, I'm sure it's the same group of pilots or Japanese aviators. They were very skilled and all. And they had received word that the war is over and they're not quite happy about it, et cetera, et cetera. And so out they go looking for, we're going down in flames. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of it. Yes, sir?
What was the target? Was it the airfields that he was?
Yeah, that final one was at Sugi Airfield, which was about 20 miles from Tokyo. Just your ordinary airfield. They had been hitting factories, mines, Curie Naval Yard, those kind of targets too. But this particular day was one of the airfields, and they didn't want to go. But orders are orders. And Hobbs they did promote him obviously, but at what cost? Yes?
How far offshore were the carriers to help that launch?
How far off were they at sea? Yeah, that could range anywhere from 20 to 60 miles, even farther, depending on where they were and what was closer to them. If they were attacking one, oh, it's this thing, sorry. So I can go over here as long as I'm not near that. Apparently, hi guys. Like if they had to try and avoid one other thing on their way to their targets. So it depended on that as to how far out the carriers would roam. Okay? Yes? Any other questions? I guess not.
So how long did it take you to write the book?
Yeah, my books generally take 2 years. 2/3 of that is research time, the final third writing. Then you hand it in to the editor, and then he has it for a month or two. They send it back with their suggestions, and you go through that process, the revisions and all. But generally 2 years. Yeah, I can do some faster if I have to, but it has to be a special thing that they're asking. I like to really dig into things deeply. And, during COVID, you couldn't go to archives, as I mentioned, so that was somewhat limited in research, although those places were very generous in providing PDFs and emailing them to you if they could. Yes, sir?
Any of your books on audio?
Yes, they all are. Yeah, there's Kindle, audio. Any of the ones we're talking about here, maybe the first one that I wrote might not be from the Naval Institute Press, but all the rest of them, yeah, you can get them audio anywhere. Walmart, my backyard. I'll be there. Yes, sir.
How many books have you written?
Rickenbacker will be the 14th of the major mainstream market. When I first started in writing, I did a series of books for like 5th, 6th, 7th grade kind of thing on biographies and sports and history. I loved doing it. It was just fun. And it sort of helped pay the bills when I was trying to get this stuff off the ground. But of the ones we're talking about, 14. Yeah, I think starting on one more. I'm still up in the air on that one, whether I'll do that or just say, hey, this is it, Eddie Rickenbacker, the one I showed you might be the last. I've had a wonderful 2 careers of teaching, and I thoroughly loved it. And writing these books, thoroughly love it. Because if I wasn't writing or speaking about World War II, nerd that I am, what would I be doing? Back home reading about it. I do love golf and stuff like that too, so I'm not a hopefully, total nerd. Okay, now there will be some books. It's the room right across the hall. There's copies of the book I just talked about, and then I have some of my other titles. The books, Dogfight Over Tokyo, you'll pay to the museum here. The other titles that I brought up, you can just pay me, or I have little squares. You can use your credit card, that kind of thing. So feel free, and I'll be happy to inscribe as many copies as you want. All right, thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. What's that? Was there another question?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A thought that came to mind is a former educator. Have you done any presentations, say, in high school settings?
Yes.
And what is the feeling, especially with today's more anti-war thought that's in our society?
Yeah, now I've done a number of high schools through Michigan and other states, Buffalo, New York, that kind of thing. The students, I always tell an audience of adults, students will surprise you with how amazing they are. We all hear examples of, well, this student did this student did that, the bum did this, the bum did that. I'll stack my students up against the same number of adults any day of the week. And by my students, not the ones just that I taught, they're just like everyone else. They love hearing these stories. They're in tears when they're listening to some of this. One teacher had the students write me afterwards, and one kid said, man, when I walked in the room and I saw you, I thought, oh, another old geezer boring us to death. and he said, but you know, you weren't too bad. He said, I actually loved hearing the stories. And another student came and said, please, because I did a talk on not forgetting them. Because one veteran told me, oh, no one cares what we did anymore, which is not true, I don't think at all. But the students would come and say, please tell him we do care, that kind of thing. One student said, you know, Mr. Wolkowitz, well, maybe some adults think, yeah, you're right, we are bored with all this stuff. We don't care about all this stuff. But she said, don't blame me. Blame yourself and the other adults. We didn't know about any of this stuff. How can we care about something we don't know about? And so when they hear what I have to say, they react. You'd be proud to hear their reactions. Yeah, so we have a great bunch of young kids out there through the years. As all of you were at one time in your life, and some of you still are young kids, obviously. And so I don't know if that answered your specific question.
Yes, it does.
But yeah. There, and then you talk to an ROTC group, either in high school or college, which I've done. My grandson, you meet his friends. Obviously, that's a controlled setting, a different kind of setting than just a normal school. but it's the same. All the heroes I wrote about in World War II, currently these kids would do the job too, if they were called on to do it. I have no doubt about that at all. So feel comfortable in that, I hope. Okay.
Thank you, John. Appreciate. Well, we might see him again with that Rickenbacker book.
Pardon me?
We might see you again with that Rickenbacker book.
Rickenbacker book? What about it?
I'm inviting you back, whether,
Oh, heck yeah.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I was wetting my lips and, okay, I've been talking a lot and that kind of thing. Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be perfect for this place because Rickenbacker was such a fascinating character. And what really surprised me, we were going back to that frame where the title of the book it had a story of courage and faith in the subtitle. I thought it was going to be a great story just to find out about Eddie Rickenbacker and how he made it 24 days adrift, alone, with 7 other guys in the Pacific. And what I found, 2 things really factored in. Number one, Rickenbacker. He was not going to let himself die or these guys die if he could help it. Because he'd faced death all over the place, and death isn't going to get me today, that kind of thing. And if a guy wanted to give up, he was on his case like you wouldn't believe. Secondly, faith. One of the boys had a New Testament with him, a pocket-sized New Testament that his church back home had given him. And he never read it. He said, okay, great, they gave me a gift, and he went off to war. Well, he grabbed that as he was exiting the plane before it was, it was sinking. And he started reading it. And soon the word started to take effect. One man was an avowed atheist. He hated that this guy had this New Testament. He said, it's a bunch of bull. It's my lawyer, you guys go ahead and pray all you want, won't do you any good. Another guy was an agnostic. Okay, maybe God exists, maybe not. I don't have proof either way. After 24 days, they had changed their tune. And then that surprised me. So I included that, obviously, because it was a remarkable transformation. So it's a combination of Rickenbacker and their faith in something, religion or themselves or whatever it was. Okay. So yeah, I'd love to come back. It took me a long time to get back to that.
Great. Well, thanks again, John. Appreciate it. Hey, we've got outstanding presentations like this every month on the first Wednesday. On July 6th, we will welcome Al and Dave Eicher, who will speak about when Amelia Earhart came to Michigan. It's the real-life story of Amelia Earhart's adventures in Michigan. Amelia Earhart actually made 25 trips to the state of Michigan to talk about and promote aviation. And they will reveal some of the stories behind that. Please remember the donation boxes off to the side and in the hallway are hungry. Thanks again to Becca for putting together these programs. You do a great job, as always. Thanks again, all of you, for coming out. Drive safely on the way home. Remember to drive as if your family's in the other car. And until next time, bye-bye and bye-bonds. See ya.